hello, good evening, welcome. My name is Murray Norton from the Jersey Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be hosting things for you this evening. Welcome to those who are watching live on Facebook, and trust me, they are. And if you are, then you can, of course, send your questions in as you can in the audience. Verbally, of course, there'll be some wandering mics around. Also, via the technology of Slido. You'll see it on the screens behind there. If you just get the Slido app up, download it, or make sure you've already got it already. If you've got Slido, then you just go to the app, download that, and then JSY Brexit is the code that will get you into all of the questions that you'll see up on the screens before you. You can rate the questions that we have already. You can put your own questions in. They can be put in anonymously. That does worry you. It certainly worries the panel we have before you. So we'll get ourselves underway. We've got about an hour, and as I say, there are people at home as well as here as we enjoy what is another glorious Indian summer outside. The only thing that's duller than the weather, of course, is talking Brexit infinitum. Although we have some rays of sunshine to brighten that a little bit on our panel. I'm delighted to welcome onto the panel today the Home Affairs Minister, Constable Len Norman, the Environment Minister, Deputy John Young, Health and Social Services Minister, that's Richard Renouf, Deputy Richard Renouf, the Chief Minister, Senator John Lafondre, the Deputy Chief Minister and Minister for Economic Development, Senator Lyndon Farnham, and the Minister for External Relations, and that is Senator Ian Gorst. Good to have you with us. We have hopefully plenty of questions from the floor, and we also have plenty of officers that can answer the questions that get deferred from the ministers. You know how it works. It's just like a scrutiny hearing. Before all of that, let's take actually our first question that's up there. It seemed to be most rated on Slido for this evening so far. Is Brexit ever going to happen? I heard this morning from Senator Gorst saying we're all prepared for the 31st, and a no-deal Brexit is the most likely of the options when we come out of Brexit. Is it completely clear that we will come out of Brexit, Senator?
I'm the wrong person to answer that question. I have taken the view which the British Parliament seems to have taken, that the result of the referendum should be honoured. The question is, how should it be honoured, and what did leaving the European Union mean to those people who voted in the referendum? Even some ardent Remainers say that they should respect the referendum, and yet we know, I was at the Liberal Democrat conference about 3 weeks ago, and their policy is if they form a majority government after the next election, they'll revoke Article 50. And some Brexiteers are saying to me they think that the demographic has changed already so much in the UK that there's potential that Brexit is lost. But we are working on the assumption there was a democratic referendum, and the UK Parliament should respect that referendum. Perhaps, Mary, in a better way than we in Jersey have sometimes respected referendums.
Perhaps if we're talking about referendums and a democratic process, we could also talk about the law that was passed in Westminster that said that the current Prime Minister, use the emphasis on it, the current Prime Minister should honour, and actually should by law ask for an extension.
I mean, we've seen the Court of Session's ruling today, which hasn't issued an order that the Prime Minister issue that letter. The reason they didn't do that, of course, if you look at their reasoning, is because he's already given that undertaken to them, that the UK government would seek that extension. That, of course, is not what they're saying. I don't think we've heard those comments coming out of the lips of the Prime Minister. It's not what they're saying in public, so we yet again at that sort of an impasse where the Parliament has changed the law to seek an extension. The Prime Minister is saying they are leaving on the 31st of October, come what may. Those two can't actually both happen, and that's why the uncertainty remains.
Okay, come back to uncertainty in just a moment. I'm going to go down the line a little bit to Deputy John Young down there. Deputy Young, is Brexit ever going to happen? Do you have your doubts it will happen?
Well, look, I think we're all into complete uncertainty as far as the UK, but what we've had to do is to make sure that we cover all the options. And I certainly have been impressed with the work that Ian and his team and all our officers have done. First of all, to look at our preparing for a day one no deal. I believe that we've done everything we can, and even tomorrow, for example, I'm having to ask the states to take a new piece of legislation that's only 2 days old, because it's now been found that there's another gap in our legislation base. This particular one is on food safety, but that's an example. But equally, we could be faced with could well be a deal. And I think, in the territory that I've been working with, which is really about working with the agricultural and fisheries industries and trying to ensure that whatever we do, we enable that line of business to continue against a situation where if we're potentially in the crossfire between the UK, who we're having to do our negotiations with, and our EU neighbours, that is extremely difficult. But I think we're pretty well prepared as we can be. But can you eliminate that uncertainty? No, we can't. And of course, in the case of fishing particularly, that is even bigger issue. So, I'm sorry I haven't got the crystal ball, I can't tell you.
I'm disappointed you haven't got it, but all the same, I thank you for it. And we'll come back and talk about agriculture and possibly staffing issues there a little bit later this evening. Let's talk about uncertainty for the economy, uncertainty for the community. Chief Minister, building a relationship with the United Kingdom, we've had 2 chief ministers and their respective governments. We've had 2 prime ministers. We've had 3 Brexit days, and we've had radical, if not erratic, changes of direction from that UK government. How difficult is it to stay on track? Because we're almost all having to keep up day by day with what's going on in the UK.
Okay, in terms of dealing with the relationship with the UK, we have a very good relationship with the UK. Obviously, if you start off from Brexit and the vote, when Philip Barsh was in Ian's place, and the officers generally had a very good working relationship there. Ian and his team have built on top of that in an absolutely excellent way. And collectively, almost all of us as ministers meet our counterparts at various times. And that's why over the last, as you'll be aware, Murray, over the last 2, 3, 4 years, actually, that engagement has been ratcheted up and up and up. And that's whether it's, I've occasionally referred to what I call BIPA, which is the British Irish Parliamentary Assembly. I actually used to sit on the same committee as Robin Walker, who then became the minister, one of the ministers responsible for DEXU, for exiting European Union, and was actually responsible for Crown dependencies. So that, as a relationship, is always a good start. Both Ian and myself, I'd like to think all of us have at various times represented the island on British Irish Council, and as Ian was saying, he was at the Liberal Democrats conference, Liberal Party even not so long ago, and both he and I were at the Conservative Party conference last week, and all those opportunities are taken to engage with politicians and particularly with ministers, just to keep reinforcing the relationship all the way through. It's an ongoing thing, almost week by week, and that's excluding the official level, of whom a number of whom are in the room, and they have very regular dealings. So that's part of the programme we've been doing, and don't forget, we've also been upping our European engagement, and even this year there's a very small team has been put in place to directly engage at the national level with the European executive side, the ministers, if you like, but the principal ones, so for example France and Ireland and Germany, just to start with. So we are working on that quite considerably.
You'll pardon my pessimism when we're 9 miles by 5, we've got 100,000 people. Do they really take us that seriously? Are we of any value to the UK that they should take us that seriously?
Well, yes, I think there's a variety of things. Actually, don't forget our history. Don't forget, and actually quite a lot of politicians like that and respect it, even though we are small.
It depends which bit of history you're looking at.
I'm talking the 1,000 years from 1066 and from the constitutional position with the United Kingdom. And particularly if you go and talk to people in the House of Lords, for example, they are very much understanding of that and supportive of it. Certainly, again, from direct experience, conversations I was having directly with politicians from either Wales or Scotland, we as the Crown dependencies were getting better engagement, and this was a year and a half ago, than they were at that point in time. So because constitutionally we were different, the various departments were dealing with us in a different way and in a very constructive way. So yes, you're absolutely right, there's always the concern that a country of 60 million people versus an island of 100,000, But actually, in terms of, I think, how we've been dealt with, it's always been respectful, it's always been understanding, and it's understanding the separate legal and constitutional position we have. Ian, you want to add to that? But
Ian, if you wish to add to that, I'm not sure
The
there's
Chief Minister is absolutely right. We are only small, but let's not forget that the heart of our economy is financial services, and that plays an overweight role in the City of London. We've had independent economists review what that situation is, and generally speaking, parliamentarians in London, despite in some areas they like to kick us, generally speaking, they acknowledge the value that Jersey's economy is to the UK's economy, as well as the historic constitutional position that the Chief Minister referred to.
And just in case people aren't aware, so the stats that we have demonstrate that we facilitate £500 billion of investment into the United Kingdom, and that's Jersey alone. So that's quite a good story to tell to UK politicians.
I'm going to bring in Senator Farnham here, Minister for Economic Development. I said uncertainty earlier on, uncertainty for the community, uncertainty for the economy. Brexit's not really been good for Jersey so far, and looking at the Fiscal Policy Panel's outlook as well, it's not likely to remain good for quite a few years yet. We could have really done without Brexit, couldn't we, Minister?
We're currently exceeding our economic capacity slightly. One might argue that had there not been a Brexit, our economy would be overheating right now. The Fiscal Policy Panel produced for the government last week a review of what a no-deal Brexit would look like, and that's not a particularly good place for us to be, because that would see a recession sort of biting in for about 3 years, increased inflation, and just a continued stabilisation of the economy, increase in prices, increase in RPI. So whilst you couldn't say it's been good for us, if there wasn't a Brexit, it could have been better, we are, despite the uncertainty in Britain and the US, Jersey is comfortably treading water at the moment, waiting for the decisions to be made.
Waiting for the lifeboat?
No, we're not waiting for a lifeboat just at the moment. Don't start talking about lifeboats tonight, Murray, if you remember. We've got two lifeboats.
Excellent. All right, we'll move on from that. Let's take a couple of the questions we've got. I mean, the first question, the top question up there is Jersey really ready for Brexit? I get the impression that most of you have answered that one. I'm going to go to the Minister for Health and Social Services, Deputy Richard Renouf. There has been concern, and I think there's another question further down which we might get to, about medical supplies. Can you squash any rumours whatsoever that there is not an issue with medical supplies and we will be fine?
Well, I think that Senator Gorst and the team and those working in my department have done everything possible to safeguard medical supplies and medicines into Jersey. And if you want me to start explaining exactly how at this time, I can do so. So
briefly, yes.
Okay, as briefly. So we're at the time of year, October, when Jersey normally brings in a peak demand for medicines, because we have to prepare for winter and all the coughs and diseases that come along. So we are at that level already, where we have a good stock of medicines and medical supplies. But in addition to that, we've been preparing on the basis of a possible difficulty in maintaining the link with the UK, because all our medicines do come from the UK. Now, it is the case that the NHS, or the Department of Health and Social Care in the UK, have themselves been building up their supplies so that they have a reserve should there be pressure on stocks throughout the UK. But they have asked all health authorities in the UK and in the Crown dependencies not to stockpile themselves. They don't want piles of medicines accumulating all around the country. But they have given us repeated assurances that we will be treated just as we are now, as part of the UK supply chain. And furthermore, we've received assurances that foodstuffs and medical supplies will be treated as a priority through the Port of Portsmouth should there be pressures in the port. And at the last resort, we've had to plan for bringing in urgent supplies by aircraft should that need be. So all the preparations that can reasonably be made for the worst case scenario I have seen are made.
Okay, I'm going to expand on the Portsmouth link, if I may, at this point, because one thing that's close to everyone's heart, presumably at this time of the evening as well, will be dinner. And with that being the case, are we going to get enough food into our supermarkets? There have been a series of ongoing meetings. There was one today with retailers and with Senator Gorst. Senator Gorst, the pinch point seems to be Portsmouth. And if there is an issue anywhere, it's going to be getting those 80% of those goods that come up through the continent, arrive through the east of England, Dover being one of those ports, Folkestone, those sort of areas, going across the south coast and then coming down to us. So that's a logistical nightmare, particularly around Portsmouth and the roundabout system and the trail off of the motorway with only about 10 or 11 truck lengths before it starts backing up. So have we got as good a deal as we can get to make sure that our goods can get through to us?
Murray, I was so looking forward to answering the top question.
I'm coming to that question in just a second.
So it's there's been a little bit of coverage in the media, certainly in the United Kingdom media, about the letter that the Hampshire Resilience Authority sent to the Department for Transport and Michael Gove, who's now coordinating no deal preparation in the United Kingdom. It's fair to say that the relationship we've had with the Port of Portsmouth, the relationship with the ferry company, the relationship with the haulier companies is excellent, and they've got really good, strong contingency plans in place. What that letter looked at was really the very issue that you're raising. If there is a pinch point between Europe and Dover, and then you have this flow down of trucks trying to access other points that don't have the right permits and certificates in place, what does that mean for the priority lane which is being set aside for Channel Islands? And there are some issues there which they continue to be addressed. Some of the officials in this room here have been on conversations with Ministry of Justice and colleagues in Department for Transport even today to make sure that modelling is refined and further work is done. Chief Minister said that he and I were in the Conservative Party conference last weekend, and indeed we were, and we met and spoke to a number of Secretaries of State who sit on Michael Gove's subcommittee, and we reiterated again to them that dealing with that modelling and refining that modelling so that our priority channels could remain unblocked was a priority for us, and they took that away and they continue to do that. I'll be having a call with the junior minister for no deal preparation I think on Wednesday, and we'll reiterate that point, and they've been working further to do refinements there. This is going to be a moving, ongoing situation right up until the 31st of October, but officials are working as hard as they possibly can. The need to make and keep that channel open is absolutely understood by Hampshire, by Portsmouth Port, as I say, by Condor, by the hauliers, and we keep making the case in Whitehall as well.
Okay, I'm going to move one along the line to Senator Farnham for the next question, because we can get things through Portsmouth all right, and we've got a dock down there which we've got capacity to get things across. Of course, we're relying on one transport company, being Condor, being our shipper to bring it in. Now, even in fair weather, on good days, during August, there have been maintenance issues, there have been breakdowns, there's an engine gone here and an engine gone there. Given the fact that we now have a likely Brexit at the end of October when the weather's not so good, it's probably not a great time to be relying on 100%, we're going to get it in. If we can get it to Portsmouth, it will be here from Condor. If you've got bad weather and you've got pinch points at Portsmouth, we might have issues on food. Senator Farnham, how confident are you that Condor can deliver for us when we really need it?
I'm 100% confident because they haven't let us down on the deliveries of food at all since I've been responsible for the relationship. It comes in late when it's weather related. Fortunately, I say fortunately, the problems seem to be the fast ferries, the passenger ferries. They carry little or no freight. The good old Goodwill and the Clipper, our key freight carrying ships. They're backed up by the Arrow, which is on charter from Condor at important times of the year, including those winter months when the seas are very rough. So, as far as freight, which is the lifeline part of the agreement we have with Condor, takes absolute priority in any such circumstances.
So, 100% confident in Condor. Mm-hmm. That's on camera. Yeah. We shall move from that and talk of the question, which is the top question that we have at the moment with the most likes, which is coming from someone called Boris, which I don't quite believe, but we'll go with it anyway. Would you back my deal? Would you back my deal? Conor Tarb, at the very end, we've not heard from you yet. Would you? I come to you first. It's just that we asked a very similar political question about Brexit, and would you have voted for Brexit, yes or no, last time we were doing this, and you were the only one that answered it. So we'll start with you, if I may, Len.
Well, I'll change a habit of a lifetime then, and I won't answer it, because it's not my decision. We are not part of the European Union. We're not in the European Union. It's a matter for the UK government and the UK Parliament to decide if the deal is reasonable. Well, not just for them, of course, but
would you hope
for the EU as well. But what I think is important to the United Kingdom, and therefore to the Crown dependencies, that there is a deal. That would be the best scenario for all parties, for the European Union, for the United Kingdom, and for the Crown dependencies. That would give us certainty. To crash out is going to cause difficulties, as we know, for all of those parties, for the EU as well as the United Kingdom and the Crown dependencies. So I would like to see the UK Prime Minister, the UK government negotiate a good deal with the European Union. So for you, my feeling is yes, that the sort of deal which is short on detail, but you can't be surprised because they haven't had much time to work on it, has merit, and the feeling I'm getting from the European Union is that they think there is some merit as well. They haven't dismissed it out of hand. It's very similar to the May deal, with the main differences, which has been the biggest bone of contention on the Irish border question, the Irish backstop. So I'm hoping that the UK government and the UK Parliament and the European Union will be able to find something in that deal that they would find acceptable before the end of the month.
So you're hoping for a deal?
I think surely we all are.
Yeah. So a deal is the best result. If we don't get a deal and it's no deal or referendum or election, which way would you go then?
Well, again, that's
I know it's hypothetical, but
again, that's a matter for the United Kingdom. You've got a hung parliament, effectively. You've got a minority government. Therefore, in any circumstances, you're likely to have an early general election. And if you have an early general election, you may or may not get some clarity after that. Depending on the result, you could have another hung parliament. You know, the United Kingdom seems to be almost evenly divided on whether they want to leave or not, even today. But you can't.
Okay,
you can't be sure of that position.
I'm going to rush down the line and get some quick yeses or nos down here. Would you, which makes it easier, would you, let's go, Deputy Young, would you back the Boris deal?
Oh, yes or no answers. Well, it'd have to be a no. And having said the why, because having been in Jersey 40 years, I've long resigned myself to being a spectator on English politics. I don't have a vote, nor do I think it was appropriate we should have one. But of course, I am a political geek, and I've followed it. I think this issue has divided all the nations of the United Kingdom. It's divided the whole community. And from what little I know of the New Deal, I am very worried about the integrity of the United Kingdom and the effect on Scotland and Wales and so on, and the Northern Ireland issues troubles me immensely. And I absolutely no doubt I agree with Len that a deal is infinitely preferable. What of course I am clear about though is looking beyond that. Even after Brexit, our issues as an island do not stop there. We have to start to address or be into addressing the post-trade situation. And what I find remarkable in the areas that I'm working on of agriculture and fisheries, it almost suggests to me that we're almost in the same situation, similar to what happened when Britain went into the EEC in the first place and they had to negotiate protocol through as a special recognition for agriculture and fisheries of the Channel Islands of the day. And I find that quite an interesting parallel. So those are issues before us, but there's no question in my mind that a deal is better. But from what little I've heard about this deal, and it's worrying that this has come out of the woodwork at the very late stage with very little information, and there is all these and so on. It's very worrying that it's a very poor process. But Britain is in crisis, and so I think a deal is better for everybody, as Len said.
Senator Farnham, you'd more than back his deal. You'd drive Prime Minister Johnson to the agreement, wouldn't you? You are good friends, I believe.
Hang on, let me just return to the question.
By all means. Would you back the deal?
I would back a deal over a no deal.
There we go. That was nice and short and sweet. Senator Gorse.
Let's imagine for a minute it is Boris, but I don't think it is. Because let's be absolutely honest, what's happened is that the Prime Minister has made some proposals which he would and is discussing with the European Union, which would allow all sides to take out the backstop and find solutions to the Northern Ireland border, and also maintain the Good Friday Agreement. So there isn't a deal on the table, there's just a few proposals. Those proposals could offer the framework for a deal. We heard President Macron over the weekend saying that they've got the end of the week to make those proposals into something that could be legally binding. But as my colleagues have said here, from the perspective of Jersey, a no deal where we can work out all of the difficulties in due course is the best option for us, and I think it is for the United Kingdom as well. Let's see, we are far from certain.
But a deal is better than no deal, is what you're saying?
A deal is better than no deal, absolutely it is, okay. And we've made that clear not only to the previous Prime Minister but to the current government. We've made it clear to the opposition parties as well. From our perspective, a deal where you can work through the difficult legal technicalities is by far the best outcome.
Questions coming in, and there's one right at the bottom that you won't have seen, so I'm going to ask that one because it's too far down. Do you have a yellow hammer type document showing Jersey's worst case scenario, Brexit no deal? And if not, why not? Is there a document that says this is how bad it could possibly look? And if you have that, presumably that's the base level that you work up with from there.
So within the 24, 36 hours of the United Kingdom publishing their yellow hammer document, firstly, let me say there was nothing in there that was a surprise to us as ministers or to officials. But within that, I think it was 24 hours, we also published a high-level précis of our equivalent document.
So there is one, it's there, and that's what you've been working for from the base.
And it's basically in the public domain now.
So people can read it. I want to go back to supply chains, if I may, and I'm wondering who we can talk to about this, because it does seem that we are, and I'm talking retail here, we are very much wedded and almost handcuffed to the connections and agencies we have supplying us from the north. We talked about our goods coming in through Portsmouth. It's a lot further away than St Malo is. I just wonder, surely it would be better to have some supplies coming in direct from France, because they're coming up through France anyway, coming in through the east of England and then coming back down to us. To those of us who don't understand the reasons why not, it does seem a fairly obvious connection that we're not exploiting. Chief Minister, is there any merit in that thought?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is, I don't forget, precisely because most of our retailers, if you look at Waitrose and the rest, are connected into UK supply chains. So it would be slightly difficult to get an M&S ready meal from St Malo in terms of that supply chain. But in terms of if there was an issue, particularly around, I think, fresh fruit and veg, and we needed to bring some stuff in from France, I believe we can do. And there has been some thought process around that. But obviously, the first stage is which is what we've done, is we've secured through the customs arrangements to the UK the fact that 90% of our goods come from the UK, and that's been the priority. But it is an option if there were some difficulties, and that's one of the reasons actually we're pleased that there's a border inspection post in St Malo.
The contingency that we've got around supply chain preparing for no deal Brexit are staged, as we've said. So you've got the Condor contingency, you've got the contingency at the port of Portsmouth, you've got the Holiers contingencies, then you've got contingency of using different ports from the port of Portsmouth, and in extremis, if all of those contingency plans, that one doesn't work, then there's the extremis, as the Chief Minister just referred to. But that, don't underestimate that would, that's very difficult for northbound supply chain retailers, as the Chief Minister said, people like M&S, because of the quality thresholds that they have around their offering. Very difficult to connect into a southern supply chain.
Senator Farnham, you've got some great contacts in the agricultural world in France. You've visited the agricultural shows in Paris on quite a few occasions. So presumably we've got some great contacts there that we can just switch on if we need to.
We have very strong relationships with France, especially Normandy and Brittany and the regions in Normandy. We display and work with them at the big agricultural show in Paris every year, where we go with Jersey business and farm Jersey, and we exchange ideas and we try and generate trade between the regions and Jersey. That's also very important politically, because, as you know, the French political system, the politicians in high office tend to come through the regions. So, because we've had long-standing relationships with the regions, quite often a number of senior ministers in government know us well because of the work we've been doing with them. For example, the previous Prime Minister, Bernard Cazeneuve, the former Mayor of Cherbourg, thank you. And so that's very helpful. Of course, as Ian has said, the vast majority of our trade is north with the UK. But of course we do have some important trade, some important fisheries trade. We export a large amount of oysters to France, and this is creating some logistical challenges that can be overcome. And we have had a good working relationship with the French, albeit as it stands, and Ian can correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at exporting into St Malo now rather than Granville, potentially. And Customs Post has been set up in St Malo for that purpose, and has been visited and inspected by Jersey officials.
Okay, we'll come back and talk some more about that, because as you know, Chamber of Commerce has been doing quite a bit of work in France, connecting with our nearest big partners in Brittany. But we'll come back to that in a minute. Deputy Young, agriculture, you mentioned fisheries before. We've just talked about oysters and export. Is that a troublesome area? Is that a worrying area in terms of export going there? Or have we secured that now so that export lifeline can still exist?
I think anybody that's worked with the industry and those in the industry knows that the effects potentially of Brexit are likely to be significant, and of course there is still a very substantial issue of unknowns. In terms of fishings, the issues is the terms of trade, our ability to land produce in the EU, and and the issues that are raised there. We've had mentioned, Senator Farnham there has mentioned about this thing called a BIP, which is an inspection point, which we're very pleased that St Malo has been able to invest in. But of course there are issues about the Norman ports, and there's still uncertainty about the Granville situation. But of course, as well as the landing of fisheries products in France and the issues of trade there, there's also the issue of access to our fishing waters, which is even more complex. At the moment, we are very fortunate. I think there is a long-standing agreement between France and Jersey in which we have mutual access to each other's waters. We have management arrangements to conserve the stocks in those, and but because potentially there is concern that has been expressed about what may happen in the event of a no-deal Brexit, an unmanaged situation whereby fishermen from perhaps north of Cap de la Hague are displaced from British waters. Those issues potentially we're actively going to have to keep very close to, and I think I'm very pleased that Ian Gorst, our External Affairs Minister, was able to go and meet with the French on Friday, because all of us are clear, whatever happens, we are trying to make sure that we maintain our relationships strong with our French neighbours, because those industries do depend strongly on that. So I don't know if Ian wants to pick up on that, but those are issues which are very significant issues, because I advise the complexities of the management of fisheries when we've got Jersey waters, we've got also the effect of our neighbours in Guernsey, French and English vessels as well. The thing is very complicated. At the moment, we're all working to EU arrangements, and of course, if that falls away, then it's very, very difficult to predict exactly what framework. The one thing that will follow, the one thing I'm clear of is that Jersey, we need to find ways of making sure our fishing industries continue. Not only is it economically important, it's culturally important to us as an island community, and also so not only that continue, but also that we conserve our fisheries stocks.
Deputy Young, thank you very much for that. I'm going to move on to some other questions here. We have a very small, finely honed and select audience live with us, and we have those watching on Facebook at home as well. Don't forget, you can send your questions in by just logging on to Slido.
There's been a surge on Facebook. We just slipped into double figures.
Excellent. Excellent. Almost as many votes.
One of them's me, by the way.
Excellent. Well, I'm very, very pleased you're watching Facebook. I wouldn't want to disturb your evening entertainment, Senator, but I will come back to. I can see what you're watching as well. We'll come back to the issue in hand, which is the question says you have no plans for a sustainable population policy to be implemented until sometime in 2020. So how will you manage any likely immigration increase post-Brexit? Likely immigration increase. It could be completely the other way. It might be that we might have a decrease. In fact, I think it's possibly more likely. So let's just reframe that question and say migration policy, a migration policy when it comes in, if it comes in at some time in the future in 2020. What's the point in having that? Because we still don't know what the effects of Brexit are going to be. Let me put it that way. Chief Minister.
Okay, so I made it very clear that in what we think is still a Brexit year,
yes,
there'll be no change in the position around immigration policy, and that's given essentially Chris Taylor has come to Upper St John chairing the Migration Policy Board that we put together. Time then to consider, as you will know, being one of the participants in the workings of the board.
Indeed, myself and Deputy John Young share the joy of seeing each other once a fortnight for about 4 hours and talking migration policy.
So,
but what's the point in doing that if you've got Brexit and all the uncertainties of Brexit?
Whatever happens, we need to get a grip around the population policy. We need to understand it, which is the purpose, hopefully, of the work that you're they're going through a kind of an informal consultation process, I'd say, at this stage, and then I understand that hopefully towards the end of this year we shall start seeing a bit of flesh being put together, some proposals. But whatever happens, we are going to have a policy in place to go ahead and deal with the future. So it doesn't matter about whether Brexit reduces population or increases population. What we've got to do is make sure that the controls that are in place are up to date, are fit for purpose, and all that sort of labelling you want to put around it, because it's not just about next year or the year after, it's about looking ahead. And it's about the next 5 years and the next 10 years.
We have got a lot of uncertainty around some of our workers of European nationality, in that some of them may decide, the seasonal workers, not to come back. There may be concern, can they come back? There may be some lack of knowledge. I know that the departments have been doing the finest work they possibly can to get that information out there. But the what if is, we come out of Brexit and we come out because of Brexit, rather, so we come out of Europe, and we can't attract the right level and the right amount of a labour force to manage this island. Have we got opportunities elsewhere? Can we look elsewhere? And can this island survive?
The short answer is yes, of course we can look elsewhere if we need to. And I believe there have been some discussions, I think Lyndon's been involved in some discussions about whether other jurisdictions might be an appropriate source. We know that, and that also then couples into the work also being done by Lyndon on around productivity, and potentially, but that's a somewhat greater leap ahead, the impact of technology as well. So yes, you're right, but as I said, we are looking at other jurisdictions as well.
A good comment up on the very end. Sir, thoughts on workforces, firstly from Europe, and workforce, labour force, if you like, coming in from, and there's no doubt we're an island that needs a migrant population that comes into work.
Sorry, Murray, just to cut Lynn off briefly, one of the other big concerns, of course, which we don't really have control over, is the exchange rate. That's probably had one of the biggest impacts in terms of workforce and the attractiveness or not of, does their, effectively, if they are sending money back, does it buy as many euros as it used to? And that's one of the risks we will always have. Sorry, Len.
No, that's okay. I mean, some industries, as you know, Murray, from your day job, have already had difficulties in attracting labour from the European Union. And as the Chief Minister just implied, that's probably because of the exchange rate between the euro and the pound following the vote of the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. I have responded to those industries. I think of agriculture and hospitality by amending the immigration work permit rules, by allowing them to seek workers from outside the European Union on a trial basis for 2 years. I've allowed the agricultural industry to seek labour for 130 staff that they wanted on a 9-month work permit, so these people don't actually gain their residential qualifications, and 150 for the hospitality industry. And I think both of those industries were pleased with that response that I was able to give, and hopefully they will be successful in recruiting from outside the European Union, the EEA, if they continue to need to. But whatever happens, of course, free movement is going to end at some time when we leave, the UK leaves the European Union. So this is, I think, probably a good marker for the future.
Things to come.
Things to come, yeah.
Question just in, and it relates to this, and I'm going to go to Deputy Richard Renner for this. How will a bad Brexit outcome affect staffing levels at the current and future hospitals?
What do we mean?
If we get onto future hospital, that's the rest of the evening done.
Current and future. Well, the future is still some years away, so let's try and deal with current.
Many years away.
Well, let's not speculate on that. And what do we mean by bad Brexit? I mean, these are just some of the uncertainties that we have to cope with as we move along. But we are constantly trying to recruit for hospital staff, for medical staff, and it's not just my department that's involved. in seeking staff. It's private enterprises and the residential homes and the care providers all through the island. There is pressure there, and it no doubt would be a challenge. I think, a type of Brexit which affects the exchange rate dramatically, as the Chief Minister said, is likely to mean we'd be unlikely to recruit as many EU workers. But there is potential, and I do see people in the island working in care posts who have come from Zimbabwe, from the Philippines, other places in Southeast Asia. I think it is possible to reach out to those places and recruit, but it might mean seeking more licenses. One would just have to deal with this as a live issue as it happens.
Of course, you can talk about euros and you can talk about getting people, but Deputy Young, isn't it probably true that it doesn't matter how many people you can find, there's still nowhere to house them? And I know we're going slightly off Brexit slightly there, but are you concerned about the amount of staff accommodation that we've got?
Well, I think there's no doubt. I mean, as a member of the migration group, obviously the work we've been doing is investigating both is what is the, if you like, the various categories of people we have in the island. We have people who are treated as registered, and then we have people who are licensed, and then we have people who are entitled. That's our current law that we've got to work within. What I'm not yet, at least I certainly haven't got, if you like, the clarity on those numbers in terms of what people are falling within what category. As we know, when in the migration group we've heard about the housing issues for those in the registered category, those who come to the island to work for the agricultural industry for short time present different issues. And I'm hopeful that the policy work that we're doing can get it to a situation when we've got clarity about that. And until we do, I don't think I can pick a number and say that is the housing target that we're going to have to meet. And so, as people know, I'm very reliant, certainly the planning process is very reliant on us resolving those issues as early as we can. But of course I accept that until we know what the Brexit outcome at the end of October, we can't do that. So I'm sorry it's a complex answer, it's a complex problem. The one thing I'm clear of is that I don't think anybody in this room can make an assumption today that it's for definite that we need 7,000 homes. I think there's a policy decision still to be made before we reach that point.
Okay, let's get back on piste again and talk, if we can, Brexit in terms of what would trading on a world trade rules mean for Jersey? What would trading on world trade rules mean for Jersey? Senator Gorst, I'm sure you've got an answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, in practical terms, very little. So one of the government policies for the last 20 years has been to seek the extension of the UK's membership of the World Trade Organisation. Post the referendum, we've really sought to up the pace on that particular issue, and very shortly that will be resolved and that will be happening. What we did before we ultimately made the decision as a group of ministers and council of ministers was do a matrix about what the effect would be to show that we are already compliant from a legislative perspective with WTO rules, because you have to submit schedules into the WTO to show that you're pucker and everything's okay. And we started that process thinking, there might be one or two changes that we need to take place. And actually, as we've gone through it, we've found that there haven't been any changes that need to take place. What it will do, it will allow us to show that we meet a basic regulatory requirement, which is the WTO, and from that we can build on it with future FTAs, the Future Economic Partnership. It shows that, as ever, we can punch our way in the world.
Trade agreements. The UK is having to, or will have to, negotiate new trade agreements. We, I assume, have been doing the same and have been doing the same for some time.
Well, somebody has kindly put this brochure on my right in front of my position. I don't know who that was. It was probably a very good member of staff. And today we've published the Let's Talk Trade consultation document, because, of course, Brexit will at some point be over and resolved one way or the other, and there'll be continue on that. But we need to think not only about preparing for a no-deal Brexit and perhaps if there is a deal, but we also need to think about our future relationship with the European Union and our future relationship with the rest of the world. And that's why we started this consultation, to talk about trade, talk about what industry might want from future FTAs and the future economic partnership. What we do know is that the current UK government has changed its position from the previous one. The previous one, under Prime Minister May, talked about a very close partnership with the European Union, which in effect was a customs union by any other name, and the new government is saying no, they want a much freer relationship, more based on a Canadian type agreement. But that presents for us challenges, but it also presents opportunity, and we need to now get on and start doing our thinking and engagement with islanders about what that future relationship might mean for Jersey, and where we think there are real opportunities for economic growth into the future.
Chief Minister, are we looking further afield?
A short answer is yes.
I'll give me the long answer.
Well, if you look at it from the point of view that in, I think it's 2 weeks' time, Jersey Finance will be opening their new office in New York, and that is, as I understand it, we do see increased business from the US. There are a couple of other engagements going along that front, so that's one of the areas we're trying to develop that relationship. At some point, I'll be going down to Asia later in the year, and that is around again just expanding our presence. Ian and I had a very good, very brief, but very good conversation with representatives from Kenya at the, again, the Conservative Party conference. So again, if you look at, and it is published, what's called the Global Market Strategy, there are some target countries within all that area, which is about diversifying the economy, or at least the sources of our business, away from UK and Europe, and that's been in play for a while, and obviously what we're doing is ratcheting that up. So I think actually the feedback we get so far has been very positive. Obviously it's a kind of, I won't say a slow burn, but it's not, you're not going to see the results next year necessarily. You might see something coming out of the US, we don't know, but the point is you're trying to put those measures in place, which is then about resilience of the economy going forward.
Thank you. I've got various questions coming in, and one of them that there was one earlier on about can I take my cats to France or to Europe at Christmas time? I'm going to look straight down at the customs team down there. Can they take your cats to France at Christmas time?
I'll throw it straight back to you with my colleague in the past. I could answer that.
I think perhaps to keep bearing in mind the time is short, I could possibly direct Perhaps I could direct those who asked the question to the excellent publication that went out recently, and in there is a section which refers directly to taking pets to the EU, and it explains it very clearly in that. So perhaps that would be a starting point, but if they would like some more information, obviously they can come back to the department and the veterinary team there.
Excellent, thank you for that. The answers are there. So we've got the cats one out of the way, which I wanted to get out of the way. Yes?
It is quite important, though, that point, that if there isn't a deal, then you've probably run out of time for Christmas. So we just need to be clear of that, because we're going back to what was the old system, where you had to go through all the processes with your pet and then wait a while to go back to the vet to get it. 3 months. That reminding me. So if you're wanting to do it for Christmas and there's no deal, you're now too late. If there is a deal and all of that, then you'll still be fine.
The Minister of Cats and Marshmallows, Senator Ian Gorst. Right. We have also down here, actually, do you have any, has there been any plans to offer financial support to local businesses that may suffer post-Brexit? You recently have done so with farmers who suffered in bad weather. What about bad Brexit and supporting businesses? And this question actually comes, if you like, with the extra caveat that I found out today, that the applications to the UK government for support to business organisations such as the Chamber of Commerce to get up to £25,000 grants to help them help businesses, and the Scottish government that has been offering all small businesses £2,000 and £4,000 grants for businesses. So if governments have been giving grants out to small businesses to help them get over what could be quite almost terminal shock of Brexit, then where's the Jersey government been with local businesses and helping them?
Well, Murray, as you will know, contrary to popular opinion, we don't like spending taxpayers' money without careful consideration and good advice from officials. We are mindful of what's happening in the United Kingdom, waiting to see the money allocated there. We do have contingencies provided for Brexit, so there's still plenty of funds available, and we're just waiting to hear back from officials a workable scheme, because we know there are challenges, particularly around fishing and for some other sectors that may need financial support, but we're working to have those recommendations and a scheme properly developed before we make an ultimate decision about it. But mirroring those sorts of small amounts of money might be feasible.
So it might be feasible to give small amounts of money to businesses that are impacted by Brexit.
That's correct.
That will warm the cockles of many a business as they head towards this season.
Small amounts, Murray.
Small amounts. Excellent. Nothing defined there. Senator Farnham.
Just looking at this from a slightly from a higher level, if we go into recession as a result, for example, of a no-deal Brexit, then the government plan is making provision to put money in our stabilisation fund of approximately £50 million a year. So that would mean that we would take a counter-cyclical approach to any challenges. So that means if the economy was to fall, we would then put money into business, maybe advanced capital program, to ensure local businesses were as engaged and as busy as possible during that time. So I know it's not looking at small grants for small businesses, but there's potentially large sums of money to help deal with a recession shock from a no-deal Brexit. And in addition to that, we've been working as part of our rural economy strategy and other work we're doing on improving productivity and being mindful of the challenges to get people to do the job. We're talking about ways we can fund technology support, artificial intelligence support, to help small businesses to embrace new technology, which means they might be less reliant on people.
Of course, we have been asking businesses, or been asking the consumer to start with, to top up their shop a little bit, to buy a little bit extra. By buying a little bit extra, that means that, of course, the retailers have got to buy a lot extra. Retailers are already saying that if you want us to start stocking, and let's face it, they got Christmas coming up anyway, but if they need to get extra stocks coming up, then is there any support for them? Because they've got a business plan, and their business plan all of a sudden is now out of the window. They've suddenly not got the budget to buy an awful lot of things that they now have to buy because of Brexit, because they're worried about supplies coming in. So is there any help from them, Senator?
Well, the approach that we've taken is to, and perhaps some might argue it's been a little bit late in the day, although we're very grateful for all the facilitation of the Chamber of Commerce, is to look at storage space both on island and off island. We've completed more or less that piece of work, and officials are having individual one-to-one meetings with retailers. It's fair to say, as you will see from the media, some retailers are satisfied with the approach that we've taken and are themselves making prudent contingency plans about pre-positioning of stocks, and others perhaps are still waiting for ministers to put their hand in the taxpayer's pocket. pocket. We're not quite at that stage. The findings that are being relayed back to me, and I've asked for a further briefing once they've had all those one-to-one meetings so that we can make appropriate decisions. But on the whole, retailers are, I think, making provisions themselves. We can facilitate perhaps extra facilities for things like frozen items on ports land, and we are doing that, and we'll be making more announcements about those in the coming days.
So it's a case of watch this space. There could be some assistance for businesses in that way. Certainly in storage.
I don't want to give any indication that there will at this point be financial assistance, but the assistance around certainly cold storage.
Chief Minister, any thoughts from yourself as we're coming towards the close of this, in terms of, are you feeling the pain that business is feeling? There is an awful lot coming in the normal cycle of a political cycle at around this time, in the pain that businesses will feel in terms of costs of doing business. Brexit is an additional cost, which is not of their doing, and not actually, to be fair, of the government of Jersey's doing either. But there must be some sensitivity within government that business is already being hit pretty hard, and actually could do with being cut a little bit of slack for some time. Is that conversation being had?
I think we're always mindful of it. I think I think you need to expand a little bit on businesses being hit pretty hard. Is that in general circumstances or in actions by the government?
I'm certain that family-friendly, being very well-meaning, is going to cost an awful lot of money. I'm certain that there are many other costs to doing business which are going up at all times, and they are continuing to go up, and there is legislation which is in the pipeline that will cost businesses more.
Yes, I think from that point of view, it is unfortunately, if that's the right word, the way that even us as a small jurisdiction have to go in that terms of, as larger jurisdictions do certain things, there's an expectation amongst the public, and certainly certain politicians, that actually we as a small jurisdiction need to do the same. So it's not necessarily specific to Jersey that those pressures are coming through. We are feeling them because we are bringing them in as individual legislation. I think from that perspective, yes, we are mindful of it, but I go back to the point, that is the complexities, I suppose, to use a common phrase, of the 21st century, and the fact that the pressures on all of us, whether it's in business or whether it's individuals and things like GDPR and all that sort of stuff, we're all facing because we are living in changing times. So I was waiting for you to be asking. That's gone again. What was my favourite one? What was our top?
I was about to finish with that, Chief Minister, and I'll go right down the line. Given the choice of what items do you top up your shop with, I'm sure that's going to waste the last minute of the time that we've got. I was just trying to think of some other questions that might be more exacting. There was a question down here: should I be taking euros out now in case of a bad exchange rate on the 31st of October? If we knew that, then we'd all be doing it. Exactly. But thank you very much for the questions and all of that. I think I'm right in saying that we are just about to fall off air and run out of time. I look to our sparse but warm audience there. Is there a final question from anyone here that didn't feel that anything was answered? Good. I feel that we've answered just about everything that we need to answer down there. I'm just looking, and I was talking, Senator, to you about support for small businesses, and the fact that you're working through thoughts on all of that at the moment. I suppose one of our staples, if this was France, the local boulangerie would be supported more than anything else right now to make sure that we get our daily bread, to take a quote. So, if we were to be looking at spending a couple of £100,000 of supporting business, would we be supporting small businesses locally to make sure they can supply us with the essentials that we need?
That would actually make sense if we were going to develop such a scheme. It's fair to say that probably larger multinational type businesses have got the ability to cushion added costs of Brexit. Smaller businesses, we know 80% of businesses in Jersey are small businesses. They are the ones that we would seek to support if that's where we get to.
I'm sorry I didn't get up and down the line to just about everyone, but I know our audience will thank those who've been on the stage because they've been the ones in the firing line. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to the Constable Norman, thank you Deputy Young, thank you Deputy Renner, thank you to the Chief Minister, official title, thank you to the Deputy Chief Minister, and thank you Senator Gorse as well. Thank you very much for joining us today.